This is Stories from the Hackery, a podcast about the students, alumni, and community members that continue to shape Nashville Software School. Nashville Software School is the nation's first nonprofit coding boot camp where a person with aptitude and motivation can gain the skills needed for a career in tech. For more information, visit us at NashvilleSoftwareSchool.com. Welcome back to Stories from the Hackery. This morning, we're chatting with two individuals, work for the same company, but both have experience with, I think, multiple startup experiences, have experience with NSS graduates, and in fact, one of them is an NSS graduate. So let's meet Fletcher Watson and David Andrews from Purity Health. So Fletcher, I'll start with you. Give us the Fletcher Watson elevator pitch.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. The beginning of my story when it comes to the career that I have now really does start with Nashville Software School. When I was around 28 or 9, I'd moved back from Korea where I was teaching English, and I wasn't sure what I wanted my career path to be. So I ended up working a retail gig and trying to pursue my own small business startups, ranging from building apps to an organic gourmet mushroom cultivation facility. And of course, I learned pretty quickly that it's hard to start businesses. And so I started hearing from a lot of my close friends about their experience at Nashville Software School, which at the time to me seemed impossible to be true. The stories that I was hearing from them, the curriculum that they were learning, the jobs that they secured after graduation. But after the 8th or 10th person that I heard a positive story from, I was like, there's got to be something to this. And so I went to the orientation, and I think that's where I first met you, John. And I think I instantly went home and signed up. And so that was probably the January of 2016. And then by July of 2016, I'd started cohort 15. And then January of 2017, I'd graduated. NSS was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It really challenged me, but it was definitely one of the most valuable things that I've ever done. It was more valuable than going to university, that's for sure. And so right after that, I had a agent or talent scout helping me find jobs and things like that. And that person found Rob Bramblett, who David had been working with at Visualize Health early in 2017. And so we got connected that way, ended up meeting David through Rob. And after our one and only meeting with each other, I started working for them, I think by March. And basically I've been working with this crew of guys kind of ever since. Visualize Health sold to a company. I ended up working for the buying company until 2023 when I was laid off, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. And then Rob started up Purity Health and kind of got the band back together. And here we are.
Okay, cool, Fletcher. Well, then let's meet one of the other band members. So, David, not an NSS graduate, but obviously worked with Fletcher in a couple of gigs. David, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, sure. I'm David Andrews. I would describe myself as a serial entrepreneur and a technologist. I'm currently a chief technology officer at Purity Health. Prior to that, back in other lives, I served as a consultant developer at a bespoke development company here in Nashville that kind of goes all over the country, and got exposed to several different industries and technologies that exist out there, various languages and development stacks, et cetera, et cetera. We primarily work with Microsoft technologies there, a lot of C#, a lot of SQL Server. Let's say the 2015 time frame, I kind of got the bug to sort of branch out on my own. And so left that company and started up with my brother and a group of guys. My first startup, which was called Scorebird, and it was a technology company intended to interact with scoreboards and to kind of build a network of high school sports sort of around the country. And that was a real learning experience in that regard. I learned what to do, what not to do, how a startup should operate, kind of what the politics of startups are, and the money management and all of that stuff. We all know that's a big part of it, right?
Oh yeah.
So so after Scorebird, I actually went back to consulting as my own group, just building up clients, and that's where I met Rob Bramblett, who Fletcher mentioned a moment ago. Rob is a entrepreneur here in the Nashville area, and I had a little bit of healthcare experience from my previous work, and so he brought me on to kind of salvage what he was working on at the time and rebuilt that structure with Fletcher and some others, also some other people from Nashville Software School. We wound up selling that company and then worked for the buyer for a brief period of time. And Rob came back to me recently and said, hey, I've got another idea for something else I want to start up, which is a clinical research organization. And that is what we're doing now at Purity Health. So that's sort of the long and short of my technology story.
Okay. And you're the CTO, right, at Purity
Yes.
Health. And then Fletcher, you, I guess, work for David, and you're the chief product officer.
Yeah, we work
Yeah,
together.
we're peers at Purity. Yep. In a lot of organizations, there is a reporting structure between CTO and CPO. We have very clearly defined sort of separate roles in our organization. I'm deep into the technology stack, how we're going to do things, what processes we're going to put in place. Fletcher, he doesn't report to me. He's driving the actual development of the product and the dev team and things like that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's kind
All
of
right,
a
cool.
unique mixture we have, but it works out. We get along.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's. I think it's always, particularly in startups, it's all more about how the team works together than whatever structure you draw on paper, right? So maybe tell us just a little bit more, David, about or Fletcher, about Purity Health. You said it's has to do with clinical trials.
Yeah. So what we're finding in the industry is that clinical trials are actually driven by just a large group of completely separate technologies. You'll have a group that is running a trial. They'll use a system for interacting with the patient data. They'll use a different system for managing the clinical trial data. They'll use another system for managing the protocol and the systems. And they're trying to build sort of a one-stop shop for all of that process to work together, to have a single application that manages everything soup to nuts.
Okay. All right. So more of an end-to-end integrated solution rather than point solutions for different things. Okay. Makes sense. All right. So maybe a nickel's worth of the technology stack.
Yeah, so we're a node stack. We run Postgres as our database backend, and our application is living in JavaScript with Node.
Okay. So pretty much single language focus for the development team, front end and back end. Postgres, which is, I feel like Postgres has just had this massive resurgence the last few years.
It has.
Or I don't know if it's a resurgence or if it's just built more momentum. I think some of the things they're doing to support some of the AI technologies is just going to keep them growing too. At least that's my sense in talking to folks.
100%. Yeah, I'm seeing Postgres as a data store member of the stack just exploding lately. I'm not sure I can point to exactly why, but I'm in many software platforms. I'm seeing it all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, well, I think the Postgres team's done a great job, and it probably didn't help when one of the primary open source competitors got acquired by Oracle. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Cannot
to its credit too, like we were working in a completely different technology stack early on at Purity Health, building a kind of a different platform before we really set our targets on what we're building now. And every single thing changed pretty much except for Postgres. That was the common denominator from the previous tech stack to the current one. So speaks
Wow.
to its usefulness.
Yeah. Well, the breadth of applications people are doing with Postgres is, it's just impressive, and it'll scale like crazy. So, okay, great. So, well, then let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about junior developers, right? Because your startup, you've both been involved in multiple startups. I think been junior developers, NSS grads, at least some of them. I don't know about all of them in both companies who've been NSS grads. I know you're still hiring NSS grads. I mean, you added a new one here relatively recently. I guess it's been a few months. So, yeah, you both had those experiences. Fletcher, you've been the junior developer coming into a startup situation. And now at Purity Health, your second go round on a tech startup in a leadership role. David, you've had the chance to direct, to make decisions to hire junior developers in multiple startups. And so I'm curious, talk to me about why you've made the decision to integrate junior developers pretty early on in the life of a couple of startups, because not everybody does that. It's a subject you can get arguments on out of people in the startup world, right? Some people are like, no, I don't want to touch anybody but a senior dev. We got to have senior devs. Don't have time to fool around with juniors. And other people, I think, make maybe planned decisions to how they're going to architect a team and want to have a mix of experience levels. Some people are kind of like, well, hey, they're less expensive. So why junior developers, right? And what's the experience been? What have you learned about using junior developers in a startup environment, relatively early in a startup?
I think the attitude that Rob has, who started both companies, early on with me, he said, we want to hire smart people and give them hard problems. And that I've really ingested that. And I think about that when I'm hiring people. And the kind of person that would go to Nashville Software School is the kind of person who is smart and is trying to challenge themselves. So right away with Nashville Software School, or anything like it, really, I mean, any similar boot camp, I guess, but my experiences with Nashville Software School, you're tapping in to a very large pool of people who are ready for a change, taking themselves seriously, and doing something hard, putting skin in the game, and all that kind of stuff, which you really want to see that kind of level of commitment from people when you're hiring them in a startup, because we don't have all the bells and whistles and everything to offer when it comes to compensation and a cool office and all these different packages and things like that. We like the grind. We like the gritty nature of this kind of stuff. And we like being small and working together on a daily basis, talking through things all the time, getting opinions from our developers about how things should work and stuff like that. So when I think about junior developers, one thing I like about it is that they're fresh, they're ready to learn, they're ready to see how we do things. The other side of that coin is somebody who has so much experience, they come onto the team and they want to do things their way. That isn't necessarily good or bad, but there can be a clash sometimes. And so when you're dipping into a pool of people who are junior, you just get this sort of hunger that I know Dave talks a lot about. And it makes them very willing participants, very cooperative people. That's the main reason that I like to hire juniors, and particularly juniors who've gone through a program like Nashville Software School. Not to mention the curriculum itself seems to be preparing them well for the types of things that we do anyway, which is very database heavy. I know your curriculum has changed and you're probably doing things now that I don't even know about, but it's a lot of back-end development. It's a lot of database-oriented things in the healthcare world, certainly. And we see that people are coming out of the program pretty well positioned for that kind of work. So across all those dimensions is why I like to go juniors, and why I like to go juniors who've gone to Nashville Software School.
Okay. What about you, David?
Oh, yeah, I want to echo 100% what Fletcher just said. And to add to that, the environment of Nashville Software School, if you think about the type of person who goes there, from what I've seen, as best I can describe it, they've made the active decision to change their lives, to to pursue a new path. And what they've chosen is to get into software development. And so Fletcher mentioned hunger there. That shows to me that you have a drive, you have a love for technology that you want to expound upon and build upon and live your life with. And so I see that all the time in Nashville Software School graduates when we're looking to hire a junior developer, is they have come in, and particularly in their capstone projects, like when you do the the demo day, I think is what it's called.
Right.
They have identified a concern of their own. They're scratching their own itch in something that they want to exist, and they have learned to build it. And so that's something I see a lot especially from NSS junior developers. Junior developers in general, as Fletcher mentioned, they're not coming out with sort of presupposed ideas about how software should be developed, what technologies to use. You should not use a string here. You should use an integer. You can simplify that data structure. They're not really focused on that so much because they haven't dealt with the life problems of efficient software development. So you can kind of guide them into that. And that is a huge benefit for companies, I think, that are trying to build their sort of institutional knowledge base through hiring junior developers and guiding them from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing like a team of 5 seniors who all came from different places who want to argue about freaking everything. Sorry, just speaking from experience here. So
it's a great way to start developing culture too, because I mean, their careers are pretty much as young as our company is a lot of the time. So
right.
we're trying to bring people in who want to commit, want to be here for a long time, and that makes the next person who comes in want to adopt all of the kind of attitudes and cooperation and the way that we work together and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, just speaking for myself, I think that's an underappreciated aspect of bringing in juniors. If you're trying to consciously shape a good culture, right? If you're trying to build a good cultural foundation for a long-term healthy development team, and you kind of know what you want it to look like, and you've made a start on it, juniors, if you screen well, juniors are not going to screw it up because they've not seen another one, right? So they're going to say, well, this is what it's like. This is how it works. And particularly the ones who are hungry to learn. I think you mentioned that, Fletcher. The learning how a good development shop culture works is every bit as important part of the learning experience as learning whatever the tools are and whatever the stuff I need to learn to become an intermediate and then a senior developer are. So,
yeah, I agree with that. And what I've noticed is, let's see, since 2017, working with a lot of the same people through that time period, there hasn't been a single day when I have dreaded going to work or a meeting with these guys and gals. Like, I know what I'm getting. They're all committed to the growth of the company, building a good product and things like that. So when you have that shared goal in mind, you can all collaborate and cooperate better. I don't really care if it's my idea that they go with or their idea that they go with. We're all trying to work on the same thing. And it just makes it such a joy to work with, which adds to productivity and makes people stick around longer and all that kind of stuff. So that's huge to me.
Yeah, and you want to support them in that, right? Like, for instance, you have a new junior developer come on, and they've never seen any of this before. This is all new to them. You want to make sure that you're getting them into a situation where you are also available for them, because they're going to be assigned an issue, add this or fix this bug. They're never going to have seen your code base or a code base this large before, more than likely. So they're looking at this giant system and where do we begin? So there is that important element of it, that because they're coming in and attacking this issue or this bug from a situation where they've never done this before, they kind of build like that confidence to get in there and and to read the code and to get it running on their machines and check through it and to find, reproduce the bug or issue, identify it, fix it. And if you can assist them in that and put them into a team where they have a level of more advanced developers to mentor them and to show them, okay, yeah, well, this screen, it's rendered by this process, and then that takes over the binding and all this, whatever it is, then they will sort of almost grow up within that environment. Like they will think about your code base and your processes from the start of their experience. And I think that's very valuable to a development company.
Yeah. So let's talk about that mentoring a little bit more, because just by observation, I think that's something. that in general our graduates are hoping to get in their first job out of NSS, right? Because I kind of sometimes think that 6 months full time, which is the program you went through, Fletcher, or doing it 12 months part time, it gets you just about to the point where you realize how little you know so far. So it's like I'm going to need a little bit of help. And you mentioned, David, the mentoring. So how have you guys thought about that mentoring, and kind of what's the process? Do people, when you bring somebody new in, do they get assigned a mentor, or is it kind of the team's responsibility to mentor? And how do you get the new person coming in, to get comfortable with however you're going to do it?
That's the word, is like comfortable, relaxed, kind of trying to remove the pressure and stress of the situation, I think is really important from my perspective, because it's really hard to operate under those conditions. If you're coming in brand new, you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on yourself. You don't want to get fired. I remember thinking, like, for the first 3 months or whatever, is this going to get me fired? You have no idea what's a good decision and what's a bad decision and all that kind of stuff. So calming them down and relaxing them and letting them understand, like, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to do something and then we're going to abandon it and we're going to pivot to something else. If only because we found a better solution to do something that we know we want to do, or Rob says, hey, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing this. It's time to change and pivot. We need to respond in kind. Removing the pressure and calming them down, I think, is a huge part of it. And I think that just comes with, like, personality, our individual attitudes. We just get along and we see eye to eye about a lot of stuff, and we treat people like adults and with respect and things like that. They know a lot of stuff that I don't know a lot about the world, and sometimes that's applicable to what we're doing. When we hired Greta Mosley out of National Software School, she had a good amount of experience in the healthcare, like a particular sector of healthcare. And so we valued that. And it ended up being very relevant when we set her on a particular task where there was a little bit of overlap in what she had previously known. I end up looking at some point, the roles almost kind of, I don't want to say flip, but I'll talk to the developers and I'll be like, your idea is better than mine. Go for it. They'll end up educating me on something that is really valuable that we should use. So to me, I don't think of myself as a mentor per se, but you kind of adopt that role when you are their boss and you're tasking them to do things. You want commitment, you want buy-in from them, and you want to share your experience that you've had that they can learn from. But ultimately, to me, it's like this is an environment where you can make mistakes, try new things. Obviously, we have goals and deadlines and things like that we have to hit, but wherever they can, like, let me try this. Let's see if this works, go for it.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that we've instantiated ever an official policy of like, okay, this is your mentor, this is your pair programmer, but we have implemented significant amount of group work. So situations where, and I recognize that, like, in the new world after COVID, where a lot of people are remote, et cetera, this gets more difficult. But we've done things like virtual office hours where, so for instance, our company right now is 100% remote. We can basically just get and sit on a meeting And if you are working on something and you have a question, just reach out to the group, say something, trying to recreate that kind of an office type of environment. If we go pre-COVID, like with Visualize Health, when we had juniors come in, we had an open office layout. And I think that's important for juniors to not feel isolated. This task that they have, they're not just sitting in a room by themselves having to fix this problem and then bring their work to the professor. That's not how it works. We're trying to build an environment where you can openly ask questions, and that is what we see from, particularly even from our newest hire, is that he has a question, he's gonna raise his hand and he's gonna ask for help.
Well, hopefully they've learned some of that at NSS, because if there's 3 or 4 things we harp on, and there's more than 3 or 4, but something they hear starting from orientation on their first day is ask questions. Be okay making mistakes, be okay asking questions, because if you're doing that, you're going to learn, and you're going to come along. And if you're in an environment where that's okay, you're going to learn way faster, right? And so the fact that you guys are trying to instantiate that in them from the very beginning, I think is really important. And just listening to you guys talk about the team and how you guys like working together and stuff. Fletcher, you said you don't think of yourself as a mentor necessarily, but new people they're gonna model the behaviors they see, right? So whether you're their formal mentor or not, they're gonna model the behaviors of the people who are the leadership, whether that's the formal leadership or the informal cultural leaders. And so I think being a role model, in a sense, is a form of mentorship. It's a form of cultural mentorship. And it sounds like you guys, that's the way you're approaching things, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, I mean, going from a developer, like I think I was hired as a SQL developer at Visualize Health. And it was honestly Dave who kind of recognized like that I would be better suited in a product-oriented role. And instead of just saying, we're going to go try another developer, no, like he's clearly committed, he being me in this case, but it would be better in this place. That's a mentor style decision that like totally changed my career in a lot of ways. And he recognized it from early on and just gave me a different kind of opportunity because he recognized something, because we talked to each other, we listened to each other, and he was observant and stuff like that. So was he assuming a mentor role when he did that? Maybe not officially, but that's what that was.
David, I'm curious, right? So you got Fletcher comes to you brand new, fresh out of the demo day womb. Thinking about sort of Fletcher's journey, which you started out as a developer out of NSS, right? But I know sometimes we say to people that you don't know what doors will open if you get into this career as a developer. Talk a little bit, David, about what your kind of how you think about what you look for in the juniors to then help them think about how they might best progress their career, right? Because some are going to come out and it's like Fletcher, right? It turns out he's a product guy, maybe not more than an engineer. Others are going to be like, no, just leave me alone. Let me write some code. Let me do my thing. Don't make me be nice to people and do that product guy stuff. So how do you sort of think about that, the leadership role really, in helping juniors find their path?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a very good question. I guess what I would say is from a managerial perspective is you want to look for interests, right? If you have somebody coming to you they're always comparing benchmarks of methodologies in like JavaScript, like, hey, this sort is faster than this other sort, and they find that interesting, then that might sort of direct your attention to the fact that this is a person who is interested in optimization, right? And that maybe when you get an issue of a procedure taking too long, that will be an idea for them to maybe be assigned to, rather than just assigning them randomly. So And then you may have somebody who's coming to you like Fletcher did, and they're more focused on what the actual technology should do, what direction it should go in, what would our clients be most interested in. You can see that they're taking a perspective of somebody outside looking in at the whole of the technology. And so that's kind of, I think that's what sort of drove me to say, man, Fletcher, you need to be in charge of the product, man. You thinking about that kind of stuff? We need that. So that sort of form of growth, I think, can be identified pretty quickly. You're going to have people, as you start to assign them tasks and you start to assign them issues, you can see if they're more interested in database. You can see if they're more interested in user experience. And you can start to sort of segment how you're assigning those tasks towards their interest so that you can get the best results in each individual area of what you're building. If somebody is following product design and new display frameworks and new style sheets and products like that, that may be a person that you want to have assign them visual tasks, like how should this screen look? Build the framework for binding our user interface. And it's hard to say this is the process that you have to follow with every individual person, but I will say 100% that as you hire junior developers and as you start working with them, those aptitudes will become clear very quickly.
I think a great example of that is what the way that Drew brought all of the AI related stuff to our attention. Not that we hadn't been paying attention as well, but he was clearly, Drew Goodman I'm talking about, who went to National Software School and works at Purity Health. He clearly was reading articles, asking questions about AI, agentic AI, and sending them in teams. I don't think we would be here if it weren't for like his kind of pursuit of the curriculum, of the course, of the technology and things like that. And so we recognize that interest that he clearly has and followed through with it. And it's at least gotten us to this point where we're having this conversation. I think he's sort of instrumental in that. And we listened to what he was interested in. Yeah, we have Ripple, on the other hand, who loves interacting with the database and makes it very clear that like those her strong suits and things like that. And so wherever possible, if there's two things that need to happen, and one of them is more database oriented, and one of them is more like application development using the Copilot AI and stuff like that, it's a very easy way for us to identify, okay, well, she should do this and he should do this. She's more interested in this and he's more interested in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ripple, by the way, I think is a fantastic success story for Nashville Software School as well. I think was she Fletcher, or she's been a developer now for 7-8 years.
Yeah, 2018.
I think since we hired her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's coming into being almost a more high intermediate / senior type of role at Purity, and so I definitely view her as a Nashville Software School success story
Big
as well.
Yeah, I mean, we hired her in Visualize Health. We carried over into the buying company that bought Visualize Health, and then, I mean, probably the day that Rob came to me about starting Purity Health, I was like, just so you know, as soon as I can, I'm going to go hire Ripple again. And we did.
Yeah, because she would have been, I guess, pretty much right after you at NSS.
She must have graduated either late 2017 or sometime in 2018, and I graduated early 2017, so she wasn't far behind.
God, it's amazing. I remember when you guys were babies, so it's
Me too.
Yeah, so it's interesting, kind of listen to you guys talk about sort of helping people find their career, because when they come out, they don't know. They may think they know, right? It's just like, I mean, we see it even at NSS. We get people that come in thinking they're going to love the front end, and by the time they graduate, they're like, I don't want to see Java. I don't want to see CSS ever again. I want to do some SQL. I want to do some back end stuff, or vice versa, right? I don't do that aesthetic art stuff, right? I want to write some application code, and then they come out and they're like, "Hey, man, give me some front end stuff." So people don't know, and they need to explore. But I think it's interesting what people's likes, people's interests reveal themselves. Sometimes you guys will see them coming from a leadership role sometimes before they'll realize, right, where their strengths and interests may lie, because they're still trying to navigate all this stuff. So that's interesting. So, and then the point about Drew, because let's see, Drew graduated this time last year, or maybe a little later last year, right? I think
that sounds about right. He did
And then-
two
about right.
courses, two different programs. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's done a couple of the continuing ed programs. Most recently, the Agentic AI for developers class.
Yeah, so it's three then. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he did the advanced SQL continuing ed
Yes.
class, right. I think pretty much right after he graduated, while he was doing his job search, and then I think you guys hired him after that.
Yes.
Anyways, yeah, but he's continued to do some of the continuing ed things, and that's one of the I'm following a bunch of discussions in the industry these days about what are we learning about generative AI and all this stuff, and you're getting some people that are like, don't want to hire juniors. You have to be senior to really take advantage of generative AI and blah blah blah. But then you see the guys like Drew. And I was reading something just 2 weeks ago now, talking about startups that are taking that senior-only approach because of generative AI and stuff are really cutting their nose off to spite their face, because the juniors will adapt this stuff so fast compared to experienced folks who are sort of trapped by their knowledge and experience sometimes, and blocked sometimes from seeing the opportunities. I remember... I don't know. It probably been shortly after you graduated, Fletcher. Sort of after we shifted to React. Was your cohort a React cohort or
I was a C#.
an Angular cohort?
Angular.
Oh, for the front end.
Yeah. Angular.
Yeah, we didn't switch to React to a little bit, just not too long after you, but after we did that, we started to get people saying that the NSS grads were the ones that showed their senior people how to use React, right? So I think some of that, there's that potential there for that kind of thing with generative AI. And maybe since that came up, let's maybe talk a little bit about generative AI. So Purity's a relatively young company. Generative AI now has been with us about 3 years, since ChatGPT 3 came out about this time 3 years ago. So where are you guys as an organization with generative AI? Kind of what's your guys' view of it? How are you using it? If you're using it, kind of what's the state of play with generative AI at Purity?
Fire away, Dave.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So obviously in the healthcare, you got to be careful with generative AI. So we have a clear separation between our production data with the PHI and how that's handled, so that we have policies and things that kind of protect that and say this is never for AI use for the data. Now you bring that out of the production environment, and let's talk about the development environment. So because generative AI is I believe is going to be a definite part of everything that's developed from here on out. I just see it as integral. If it can continue along in the pace that it has been continuing, then it's going to be a tool that everybody needs to know how to utilize. I see it building itself deeply into the developer psyche for when you're developing code. So we tried to make our shop as AI enabled as possible. We've got GitHub Copilot licenses for all of our developers, and we encourage them to write as much as possible with generative AI for the purpose of coding velocity, especially since we're building something new. There maybe in the future this changes, but our our goal right now is to get our software out there, get it developed, get it to where we can begin marketing it and selling it. And that's what we're very close in that process. So we're using it very, very deeply to build our products. Now, what I'm seeing is that in order to successfully do that, there's two things you need to be aware of. You, as, let's say you're a little further along, you're in charge of a generative AI project, you're a manager of a team, you have got to put in place very strong guardrails on that AI, because it's going to develop code. The code will work, but is the code good? That's a question that needs to be asked. Sometimes I'll read code that the AI has generated and I'll be like, nobody would ever, why is it doing that? That's not the right way to write that. And so you have to look for that stuff. So your code review process from your team has got to be very in-depth, and you have to have strong guardrails in place. So for instance, we've got rules such as, like, when our PRs are submitted for review, there are files that we're checking that the AI has not changed. Like, is it staying within the realm that we want it to be in? You can't go and edit the packages or the dependencies or things like that. Are you staying within the areas of the software that we want you to stay in? And then secondly, for like APIs and user experiences, we're requiring complete code coverage on our tests. So every screen that gets updated, every new call has got to have in place a test to check that it is functional. That'll help us with regressions in the future. In the past, we were able to get away without that. I'll just put it out there. We could edit screens and we could do user acceptance testing and it looks good to the developer. Okay, we're good to go. We could get away without it. But now with AI, it's a necessity. So those are the items I think that you always have to look at with AI. And I mentioned two, actually. I haven't got to my second one. The second one is that AI is very strongly used and should always be viewed, in my opinion, as a tool. It's at this point, it is not an additional developer on your team. It is a tool for a developer to use, and every bit of code that it writes, they should understand that code. Go back and look through it. Make sure it didn't step out of bounds of what you wanted it to do, that it was very concise in what it did. If you can have that rule in place, then you'll generate code that is, in my opinion, good enough for moving forward into production with the strong PRs and with strong code coverage on your tests and good PR code review. So that's kind of the processes that we're putting into place.
Yeah, that's it. Interesting. That very much parallels a lot of what we've observed from the shops that are getting the most experience with using it, right? Yes, my developers may be writing a lower percentage of the code, but they're reviewing 100% of the stuff that got generated at their direction. Mm-hmm. And our code reviews are better than they've ever been because they have to be. And we're improving our test coverage. Right. Are you, when you're talking about having improving the test coverage, having a test for every, like API call, whatever, are you still manually developing the test? Is that something the developers are building on their own? Or is that something you're letting the generative AI tool construct? Because I've heard arguments about that one back and forth.
Oh, really? We allow the generative AI to build the tests as well. It's something that I spend a lot of time on, making sure that those tests are effective and are actually testing what it should be testing. So one rule that we make sure that we do all the time is when you're testing these endpoints and these UI calls, are you also doing like the negative version of that? Mm-hmm. For instance, if a role is supposed to be able to access an endpoint, okay, great, you can call the endpoint, but are you also testing that somebody who does not have that role or should not is getting denied? So you want to make sure that you're covering it from every perspective that you possibly can. It's almost like it's like a mini fuzzing almost, that you want to try to give it good inputs, you want to give it bad inputs, random inputs, as much as you possibly can.
Okay. All right. So you're using the tool, but in some respects, it sounds like you're treating it just like the code. The tests are getting reviewed, right? They're getting the same kind of scrutiny as the code does.
That's right, if not more.
From my perspective, I don't write code, but I do directly manage the developers, which is an odd thing for a CPO to do. But I noticed, because we sent, or your program, your agentic AI program that Ripple and Drew both went to, kind of happened right when we started building our new software with Copilot and with AI. And I noticed the stuff that they were bringing back from the classroom was the stuff that Dave was figuring out sort of on his own, doing whatever research you're doing. And it was mirroring a lot of the concepts. And that Drew and Ripple mentioned that as well, that like in the real world at our company, Dave was changing and evolving his responsibilities to be, how do you wrangle the AI, right? How do you make sure that it doesn't do too much? How do you make sure that it doesn't do too little? It almost never does too little. And just watching him kind of learn how to do this, I guess maybe on the fly or just in real time while they were going through an official course, and seeing those two things mirrored together was a really interesting observation. And it is, I don't know if we would have been able to really use Copilot and Claude and ChatGPT 5 as effectively as we are if Dave hadn't put these guardrails that he's talking about in place and sort of taught us how to prompt, right? Like I use ChatGPT all the time and I'm talking to it all the time. So from just the chat perspective, I feel like I'm pretty good at the prompting and speaking to a computer like a computer. But when it comes to actually using prompts to write code, that's a different thing. And it's incredibly beneficial to have all of these checks and systems and sort of philosophies for prompting like shared amongst the team from your curriculum and from Dave's head.
Well, it's great to hear that the class has been valuable, and that it has matched you, David, with what you've been gathering from experience and researching other people and stuff. Because there is absolutely, you've alluded to it, Fletcher, there is a learning curve figuring out how to use these things. It's not kind of free. I can just pick it up and go, right? The whole, how do I direct it? How do I give it good specifications? Which is really what prompting's all about, right? Mm-hmm. It's the specs we were always supposed to write, but never used to write. It's just like our tests that we were always supposed to write, but didn't.
Well, and like one developer can write a prompt, another developer writes a very similar prompt, and they get different results.
They get totally different results.
Yeah, and
now,
so
you
need a way to combine all that.
Are you using it mostly for greenfield code at this point, as opposed to enhancing an existing code base?
Yeah, so we're building out MVP right now, and we're anticipating a release of our software within maybe the next 60 days for our first set of clinical trials to utilize. So this is all new development, new screens that we're using it for. I imagine once we get to the point where we are maintaining a code base, that our parameters are going to change significantly.
Yeah. I mean, again, everything we've tried to learn by studying, or even some of our own internal project work, brownfield, and they're different in a brownfield environment, right? And so, and in fact, we're building out another one of the continuing ed classes that's I don't know what the official title of it will be, because it's mixing a couple of things. It's a testing and debugging class, but also with a focus on learning how to do that in an existing code base that you don't know. So very similar to what a lot of our grads get hired into brownfield environments where there's a big code base they have to learn, right? Yeah. And so I think these generative AI tools can be, if you learn how to use them for this, they can help you learn a code base faster than you would otherwise learn that code base. And so we're hoping that this testing and debugging class will also help people learn the skills of how to use these tools to learn an existing code base, as well as how to do better testing and debugging, since we've got to, if we're going to use these, if we're going to get full advantage of these tools. So
Yeah. Well, the one thing I know, and I would love to share with your audience, is I'm seeing with the generative AI, you've seen a lot of startups pop up that wouldn't have before, because somebody has an idea and is able to make it real. If that is what you're doing, put those guardrails in place. Spend time thinking about that, because there are your code review, your code quality. When you tell the AI to add a button to a screen, is it going and changing your CSS styles? Stuff like that. Review for that, look for that, because there are entire now companies and industries that are actually AI salvage that are spinning up, that a SaaS has reached a certain level of complexity and the AI is no longer able to effectively work in it because it is frankly spaghetti and it's changing all over the project anytime you want to do it. There are whole teams now that are coming in to clean that up for startups. So if member of your audience is working on a new technology, new app, building it with AI, or they're a junior developer at NSS and they're learning and trying have an ultimate goal of being an entrepreneur or building their own startup, from the beginning, think about those guardrails. Am I testing every function? Am I limiting where it updates files? Am I organizing my project correctly into small segments that can be updated efficiently? I think that's important for anybody who's using generative AI.
And it actually will make you develop faster, because you won't be undoing so much stuff along the way. And productivity is like kind of the number one reason why you would want to use AI in the first place. So if you're just constantly having to undo or change or whatever, then you're defeating the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, you're defeating your whole purpose. That's right. Yeah, there's a huge difference. You know, everybody wants to talk about vibe coding, right? There's a huge difference between vibe coding a throwaway, right? Something that you're doing as a prototype, because man, you can stand up a prototype these days so fast, right? Yep. But if you want to use that as a base for production code that you're going to live with and enhance and whatever, then maybe a little more care would be a good thing.
And planning was always such a huge part of the National Software School curriculum when I was there. Like spending time with your group, discussing, writing down your plan. What are we building? How are we going to build it? And this kind of forces you to do that in a new dimension that we'd never really anticipated years and years ago. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, guys, if there's anything else on that, love to hear it. Really appreciate the two of you giving us the time, coming on here and sharing what's going on at Purity Health. It's great to hear, and look forward to hearing how the rollout on the application goes here in the near term. I didn't realize we were that close. So, good luck with that. That's always first production rollout's always pretty interesting time in a startup. So good luck. Yeah. Good luck with that. So, but maybe on the way out, we always like to ask our guests what their technology guilty pleasure is. So to the extent that anybody working at a startup trying to drive the first release to market has time for a guilty pleasure, give me a taste of what you love to geek out with. We all love to geek out on something, right? So what's your technology guilty pleasure?
I will before I answer that, I will say it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. NSS has meant a great deal to me personally, but I've also been able to tap into the network and help grow companies and stuff like that. So I'm very fortunate for the relationship that I have with National Software School, Purity has with National Software School. So thanks a lot for having us. I would say the emphasis on guilty pleasure would It's not a crazy answer. It's just social media. Like, it's truly guilty. So any of them, Instagram. I mean, if you look at the most used app on my phone, it is YouTube, which I guess still counts as social media. From a product person, from a communications person, seeing what these applications are doing, whether we know it or not, is staggering. And so I regularly think about that from time to time, and I try to peel myself away from them as much as I can. But boy, they have a strong grip. Outside of social media, though, just rapidly experimenting with ChatGPT and Claude, those two in particular, on any number of things. But most recently, it's like a side hustle, how to configure a camper trailer, somebody who likes to communicate and talk, being able to communicate with an AI that has infinitely more patience than I do and never tires of the conversation, I'm able to really just see, like, what is the logical endpoint of this thought process that I have if I take it all the way in this direction. So those two things I spend quite a bit of time on, guiltily. More for the first one.
Okay. What about you, David?
Yeah, well, I want to mirror Fletcher's thoughts there. Thank you guys for having me on here. It's been a real honor to come on and share some of my perspectives, and I hope I've been helpful to anybody listening to this. As far as my guilty pleasure, it's I want so badly, and always have, to be a game developer. So when I was a kid, I got into computers, just playing video games on this 386 that my dad bought for us, and learned BASIC so that I could make my own stuff. And so when I'm not doing the healthcare development stuff, I'm playing in Godot. I'm trying to make a little video game, and I'm not saying I'm good at it, but that's my definite guilty pleasure is learning game development. It's almost kind of sad, to be honest, how many game development assets I have purchased, sound effects, sprite sheets of characters. I have a whole library and not a single game to my name that I've developed. But I guess that's my guilty pleasure.
All right, David. It is funny how gaming is such a big part of what attracted so many people, though, to this profession. And then they've never built a game. They've never, right. It's like, but one of these days. So,
right.
All right. Well, again, guys, thank you both for coming on. It's great to have you on. It's great to hear about Purity. Great to hear, some of your thoughts about how to take advantage of juniors, right? And how to build. I love some of the discussion about trying to build a healthy developer culture, right? Because I've always been a big bug on that. And I think it's so important and maybe underappreciated in a lot of places. But it's one of the cool things about a startup is if you care about that, you get to do it, all right? So I'm looking forward to seeing the product roll out and keeping up with what you guys are doing down the road. So thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for listening. You can find links to any of the things we mentioned in today's podcast in the show notes below, as they say in the podcast game. Hear more insights like these when you visit NashvilleSoftwareSchool.com.